Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddy Network podcast. My guest today is Jeff Adams, who is with Prosper Energy Management. And I know Jeff because he is managing some oil and gas assets that my grandparents have had for, I think, 50 years at least. So, so I've gotten to know Jeff because our family's divided into four families and four different owners, and I'm kind of in charge of our family's piece. So welcome, Jeff, and I'm
Thank
glad
you.
I'm glad to have you on here, and it's been good to get to know you over the last year. And so tell us about what you do and how you came to be interested in the world of energy and oil and gas and all of this. I mean, just tell us whatever you feel like you want to tell us, because I think we're all very uninformed about the energy sector, and uh, and I'm not really interested in the politics of it. I'm interested in the practical on the ground stuff. So, kind of give us an idea of who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. So, well, Ed, first off, thank you for having me. Um, Prosper, we're a mineral manager. So our job is to act as agent on behalf of our clients, right? Our clients are individuals, family office, trusts, LLCs, foundations, right? Anybody who owns the minerals in the ground, right? And so these clients of ours, when an oil company wants to come drill on their property, right? There's contracts involved, there's production, there's activity on their property, on their minerals, right? There's a lot of different things that go into it that the oil companies are doing. And so we are there to represent our clients to basically make sure that contracts, protections in place, clients are getting the money that they're entitled to based off the lease rates. You know, basically make sure that everything's audited and tracked and monitored because there's a lot of big numbers involved with oil and gas. There's a lot of really small numbers. And if you're not sure what exactly you're looking for and know what questions to ask, it can be very intimidating, right? There's nothing like the energy industry. And it's one of the reasons that I love it. My background is I'm a petroleum engineer by degree. I grew up in Houston, Texas. My father was a geologist. So I spent, from a young age, visiting rigs, looking at logs with my dad, helping him, color in different logs and just being around the industry, right? My whole life. Really just had a love for it and got into petroleum engineering, loved the technical side. Started my career out of college working for an oil company and was on workover rigs, on drilling rigs, on frac jobs, out there in the field, hands on the equipment, working with the team out there, and really got to get deep into what motivates oil companies, right? Why are they doing what they're doing? Why are they not doing something? What are the factors that are driving, focus on a certain area from a geologic standpoint? Maybe it's commodity prices are dictating what economically makes sense to go do this, do that, to not do this. So all of those things, right? So I can really kind of put myself in the mindset of what motivates the oil companies, right? And so now being on the other side of the
Let
fence,
me ask you one question before we go further.
yeah, yeah.
When you speak of an oil company, what are you talking about? What?
So majors, independents, even the small, tiny kind of mom and pop shops, right? So anybody from, Exxon, Mobil, Conoco, all the way down to some of the smaller independents, even down to, a family office that could operate, right? Anybody who is dictating the operations of, the leasing, drilling the wells, producing the wells, and so on. So When I say operator, I mean the oil company.
I'm thinking of the image of the film Hell and High Water. You know that
Oh
him?
yeah.
And at the end of the film, I forget his name, but he's sitting on his porch and off to the side
And
of the
on the
house,
pump jack.
there's a pump jack going, and that's on his
Right.
property. I mean, and so it's like I got a little bit of land. I'm going to put a well there, and I'm going to sell my oil and gas to whoever wants to buy it. It's kind of like that in some ways?
So it's kind of like that, but in the end of that movie, those pump jacks out there producing on their property were probably drilled and produced by the operator. So the ConocoPhillips, the Exxon Mobil's, they came out there, drilled those wells, and are producing those. The owner of the minerals, which would be, Chris Pine in the end of the movie, right?
Right.
He is the mineral owner. And so he's getting a cut of the production from those wells. So he's not involved with, the owner isn't involved with the operations. They're not dictating what's happening on that well. They're receiving that royalty payment basically for allowing that operator to produce that well.
So my
So you
so my
own those
family
minerals.
so my family
Go
is
ahead.
like Chris Pine.
Yes, exactly. So you own those minerals. So just like you own the deed to your house, right? You can own the deed to the dirt, right? From the surface of the earth to the center of the earth. And anything of value in that rectangle, right? Oil, gas, lithium, diamonds, right? Anything of value in the dirt, right? You're entitled to compensation for what comes out, right? And so just like you own your home, you can rent your home out, right? You do a lease, you have a tenant, they come in, they pay you a rent check, right? You still own the house, but now you're getting a rent check from a tenant, right? You're doing the same thing with an oil company. I own the minerals. I'm going to do a lease contract with the operator and I get 25, if I own 100% of the minerals, I get 25% of every dollar that comes out of the ground, right? So Shell comes in, drills a well. For every $100 that well produces, you, the mineral owner, get 25 bucks. The other 75 goes to the operator working interest partner. So that's a very high level, basic example. There's typically hundreds of owners and it gets real chopped up, but that's the premise is you, the mineral owner, for allowing them to drill, you're getting that check in the mail as, hey, here's your, here's your royalty percentage that you're getting. So, that's what you're seeing when you look at, the end of hella high water with those pump jacks in the background is they're getting those royalty checks now from those wells on their property.
So they knew that there were minerals underneath the ground. They knew that because some kind of research had gone into determining what was underneath the top
Mm-hmm.
layer of ground. So how
Right.
did they do that?
So the oil companies will use seismic, which essentially is they'll go out and uh, essentially get a mapping. I'm trying to describe this. They're mapping what's underneath the ground. Okay, the best way to put it. And using seismic, they'll use large vibration trucks and geophones and different acoustics to send acoustics down into the earth. The reflections come back will dictate and tell them, hey, is there any kind of liquids down here? Is there gas based on the different densities of rock versus water, liquid, oil, gas? Those different. They'll get different acoustics that come back, and with that information, they'll map. Hey, we'll kind of delineate. Here's where we're seeing the oil and gas where it's located underneath the surface. So there's and it's been decades of them mapping this. So at this point, most everybody at least has delineated it to a good extent where all these basins are, where these shale basins are, where the formations are. Now I will, preface that with there's always new technology, there's always new discoveries, right? That are always going to be happening. So I'm not saying that we know where every single play is at this point, but we have a pretty good idea with the information that we have.
It,
Uh, so
it's
these operators kind of know. They know um, where to be looking.
now, am I correct in remembering that recently there was a new find out there in West Texas that they found another deposit, which
So there's
is
a
that
there's a
just
new book. It's incredible, and another reason why I love this industry is there's a new focus, or at least increased effort, to look at the Barnett Shale in the Permian. And when we talk about Barnett, and Barnett's just the name of the shale formation that we're talking about. Um, the Barnett Shale is typically known for, west of DFW, just right outside of Fort Worth. Weatherford is the big gas play with the Barnett Shale, right? When we think about West Texas and the Permian Basin, right, we're thinking about different formations called the Wolfcamp, Sprayberry, Bone Spring, right? The Barnett is much deeper, right? It's still there, right, but it's a lot deeper than what we've been producing. But now, we're seeing permits and new wells being drilled all the way down into the Barnett. Um, and so one of the
how deep is
things,
that? How deep is that?
11,000, 11, 11 to 12,000. Um, so over 2 miles, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you got to think about drawing a straight line for 2 miles, and that's how far down they're going. Um, it's incredible, these shale basins, because there's you've got these stacked benches on top of each other, right? And so you could look at a map, right, from a top down view of West Texas, and you would just see wells everywhere, right? And you go, there's no way they can put any more wells on any of these properties. It's drilled up. There's no way. But what you don't realize, at least from a top down view, is in the Permian Basin, you've got Sprayberry, and then you've got Wolfcamp, and it's not just Wolfcamp; it's Wolfcamp A, B, C, D, right? You've got these different layers. Now you've got Barnett underneath. So with this horizontal drilling, you can literally stack horizontal wells on top of each other, you know, all in the same rectangle. And so the prolificness of uh, these shale basins, specifically the Permian Basin, it's incredible. I mean, and you know, the Permian, West Texas, I mean, was goat pasture for hundreds of years. Now, oil and gas companies knew that those shale plays were there. They drilled through them and got gas shows as they drilled through these formations, but the technology was not there to turn the pipe 90 degrees and go horizontally. Once we figured that out, it changed the game.
Yeah.
Look at West Texas now. It's incredible. And the technology keeps improving, because when they started horizontally, it was 1 mile laterals. Then it was the 2 mile laterals. Now they're drilling three. I've seen even almost 4 mile laterals. It's the just the technology aspect of it, that you can drill a piece of pipe straight down 2 miles and then turn it 90 degrees and drill 2 to 3 miles in that direction. And when you just think about that, it's like, okay, if I'm standing in this room and this is where the drilling rig is, or this is where the wellhead is, I'm actually producing from 2 miles down the road and 2 miles down, you know,
Yeah.
and it's all coming right up to this well. And it's fantastic. It's amazing. It blows me away. I just thinking about it. I love talking about it, and every time I do, I get so excited just to think about what's going to be next that this industry is going to be able to pull off. It's incredible.
I had a conversation with an anthropologist years ago, and he was talking about he was an archaeologist, excuse me, he was an archaeologist, and he was talking about um, when the world will end. basically. I mean,
Right.
that's a figure of speech, collapse of the society and all that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
his,
yeah.
his prediction was it's when it becomes too expensive to drill for oil. That was his claim.
Hmm.
And I have other friends that are in this world, and one that you're going to meet fairly soon. And I asked him, "What do you think about that?" And his response is, "We will never reach the point where we won't utilize the technology that we have and improve upon the technology we have. It'll never become so costly that we won't drill."
Right. Oh, I agree. I agree. We have found, I mean, the one thing about the energy industry, the oil and gas industry, is it's so complex. There's so many different factors that can dictate how we move and change, right? Um, look at commodity price as one, right? We've seen the price of oil go from $8 a barrel in the 80s and the 90s up to $100, $140 a barrel, back down to 30, up to 100 again. And then, just a few years ago when we all went through COVID, oil went to zero in April of 2020, and then it's worked its way back up. So, you look at, a big factor that dictates the industry is the price of oil, right? And whatever factors that are moving it, whether it's $100 or we're at 65 today, or if we're at 30, um, the industry figures out a way to adjust and adapt, and with technology. And so if that means you know not just eliminating costs in areas we can, but it could also be finding efficiencies in certain technologies, whether on the drilling front or the completion side. But there's always going to be those out there figuring out ways to make it work from an economic standpoint. Um, and so I agree. I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where we're going to throw our hands up and say, that's it, guys. We give up. We can't do it anymore. That's not how the energy industry is. That's not how anybody's mind works. That's not who we are. We figure out a way to make it work. And
Well,
and you have and you think about how much the presumption of when the world will end. Yeah, if we stopped producing oil, that would really make life hard, right? Because everybody thinks about, well, the price of gasoline at the pump, right? Or putting gasoline in my car. But what they don't realize is it's not just gasoline at the pump. It's jet fuel. It's clothing. It's plastics. It's pharmaceuticals. You know, almost everything you can touch around your house has some sort of oil and gas that was used to make it, right? Um, and so, yeah, if you stop producing oil and gas, there's a lot of things that are going to go away. So I do agree with that notion that whenever we stop producing these hydrocarbons, it would be a problem. But I agree that we're never going to stop finding ways to be efficient and
it won't be in our
economic.
lifetime, I presume.
Yeah, it won't be in our lifetime. It won't be in mine. It won't be in my kids or my grandkids. It won't be. So.
Well, I've found this fascinating as I've gotten to know you, and when I was in your office last year, and you showed me, your the panel screen on the wall, and how what amazed me was the information technology that you have available to you to know exactly
Mhm.
what's going on with each well at every moment it is drilling. I mean, that to me
Mhm.
was, um, I don't think people have any clue as to how sophisticated that information technology is, and that's just
Mhm.
what you think.
Yeah. No, it's it all, stems from, when these operators are, drilling, producing these wells, they're reporting all this information, right, to the Railroad Commission or the Oklahoma Corporation Commission, whatever state they're in, right? They're having to report this information, right? Um, you know, Directional surveys showing the path of their wellbore because everybody needs to know where this piece of pipe is, right? You can't just put a pipe in the ground and go, well, no one's going to really know where it is. They know you have to report all that information. When you're producing, uh, oil, gas, you have to report all of that information, and it's out there. And so we're able to tap into that, and we use that right to benefit our clients basically because information is everything, and the more you know, right, the more you're going to understand what's happening on your particular tract of land as far as again why something's happening, why something's not happening, where the activity is moving. Is it moving towards you? Is it moving away? All of that information we have the ability to access and use to help basically better manage those assets for sure. It's fun. I can spend hours just what I call go finding, and I'll pull this up and I'll just start clicking around, zooming in. What's happening here? What's this well? Who's drilling that well? How much is it producing? Oh, what's happening next door? I can see a lot of this information and kind of understand the ebbs and flows of, who the players are, right? Oh, okay, I see, this operator's over here permitting a bunch of wells. Well, then there's their competitor. There's another operator over here, leasing up land or permitting, so you can kind of see all the players and how they're moving and what they're doing or what they're not doing to an
There,
extent. You can try to put yourself in that mindset.
so you sort of are able to uh, define what their personalities are in terms of how the decisions they're making on when they're drilling and not drilling and that sort of thing. Um,
Absolutely. You can try. You can try to put yourself in their mind of right. Oh, they're really focused on this right now, and I can see the tracks that they have. They're trying to, focus their capex dollars on these tracks or these properties here. Whereas maybe they've got some other leases on the perimeter that maybe they've got one well that's holding, and they'll probably come back to it later. You can kind of see how their drill schedules can, move and flow. So one of the cool things that we have is also we're the software that we utilize. They have a GPS tracker on every drilling rig that's out there. And so I can see real time, a little, an oil derrick icon, right? And I can see where the rig is moving as they move from one well to the next in real time. So that's pretty neat too, to kind of see, where a rig is moving and why it's moving a certain way and all of those. So it's powerful. It's very powerful.
it's hard to hide, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Hard to
Um,
hide.
the popular culture surrounding oil and gas and stuff like that. I mean, I'm going back to thinking about that great Rock Hudson, Elizabeth Taylor film Giant. That was to me, I think, my introduction to what that world is out there in Texas.
Hmm.
My
Hmm.
grandmother was native of Dallas, and she grew up in Dallas, and so there was some of that. What would I call it? That mythology about Texas and oil and stuff like that. Um, that every now and then was spoken of, but not often. But it hung in the ether, so to speak,
Right.
and it's to me it's very interesting how the popular culture of this very scientific mechanized business has grown up, and today Taylor Sheridan is the kind of the master of
Yeah.
the stories of the Western United States. Um,
Right.
and now we have 2 seasons of Landman with Billy Bob Thornton, who's a great
Yeah.
great actor. So,
Oh yeah.
so as I mean, you were at one point in your career a landman, correct?
No, I was not.
You were not.
But no, but my vice president was. He's a landman, and he's been, through
So
many
what?
many courthouses in West Texas for sure.
Tell us what a kind of maybe break the fantasy bubble of the TV show and what does a landman actually do?
Yeah. So a landman, he's going to be the individual that's essentially understanding, researching the title. So again, we kind of go back to, you have a deed where you own the minerals in the ground, just like you would have a deed to your home. Well, that those minerals have probably changed hands many times over, the centuries, right? Um, and so when these oil companies are, you know, wanting to drill, they need to identify who owns the minerals. Is it one person? Is it 500 people? Who all owns in this rectangle that we want to drill in, right? And so the landman is tasked with essentially identifying, and they will go and say, okay, you know, um, John Smith owns this. Well, he got it from his father, who got it from, his father, his mother. They acquired it from, the Bank of San Antonio, right? Or however the chain of title looks, right? They've got to understand that. And what happens is it gets chopped up as you change title, because someone says, well, when I pass, I'm giving 50% to my two kids, right? And then that child has four kids and it gets split four ways. So there's, it could get diced many different ways. And so the landman goes, to the county courthouses, goes into the basements, and is pulling all of these title records to really understand who owns what, where, and how much, right? That way the oil companies know to contact them and essentially get a lease in place with them and pay them. The landmen will also negotiate those leases, right, for the oil companies. So once they locate those people, they'll, negotiate that contract, that lease that, establishes the royalty rate and all those things. So when we think about Billy Bob Thornton's character, I I look at him as a fixer, not specifically a landman. If you ask my VP about what a landman does, he says, well, if they made a show about what a landman, he said it'd probably be kind of boring. A guy going to courthouses, pulling records, and maybe playing golf here and there. So I think the term, landman's it's a great term for the show, but I think what an actual landman does, from the industry standpoint, is a little bit more of running that title and negotiating the contracts on behalf of the oil companies.
The more you say this, the more confused I get with what they have presented to us. So they're calling him a landman, but they have a drilling company, but they're
Mhm.
also the owners of the land. And and
Mhm.
and it, is that normal or is that unusual?
No, well,
Because
it's not unusual, but it's definitely not normal. I would say these days there's still um, players out there who own the minerals, and they also operate, whether on their tracks or on
is
others.
that the old
So
way of doing? Is that the old way?
that does happen. Um,
I mean, that's what Giant
and
does.
depending on how far back we want to go, but I would say, typically that's how things would start. I mean, if you think back of like There Will Be Blood, right, with Daniel Day-Lewis,
Yeah.
if he could acquire the minerals, right, he would acquire them. If somebody wasn't going to sell, then he would lease. But there's plenty of places where the operator also owns the minerals as well. But I think most of the world these days, you've got, you know, different mineral owners separate from the operator. But um,
So
go ahead.
let me ask you this. I mean, obviously I have lots of questions because I find this fascinating. I find this totally unlike any other business I've ever had any connection to. So let's say someone's watching our conversation and they say,
Mhm,
I'd like to get into the oil and gas business.
mhm.
And obviously they could go invest in a company, buy stock in a company that is
Right.
doing this. But what they wanted to do is they actually want to um, buy some mineral rights or mineral land, and that they want to approach it from that
Yeah.
standpoint. How does that happen? Where does someone go to buy land and the mineral rights on a piece of property? How does that happen?
Yes. Well, first off, you've got to have somebody who's willing to sell. Um, and I would say there are a lot of mineral owners out there that, are not interested in selling their minerals, right? Especially when they're being produced on and you've got a prolific asset like that. But if there is, somebody that's out there selling, or if you're looking to buy, I mean, there's different auction sites that you can go to. There's good brokers out there as well, that maybe have a mineral package that a seller is looking to sell. And as a buyer, you've got to know these brokers, you've got to know these contacts, that can help you source, minerals that are out there. Um, Now, you've also got to be careful, um, if you're a buyer, because if you're someone who's not in the industry and you see something out there, just because you buy the minerals doesn't mean they're ever going to get produced,
Hmm.
right? You could own minerals, in Texas, and if there's no oil and gas to be had, well, you've got minerals, but it's not going to start generating any income, right? So if you're looking for an asset that's going to have a cash flow behind it, right? Um, you've got to look in areas where everybody's looking and everybody wants it. So now you've got to start figuring out how much you're willing to spend. Okay. Um, because if you've got an asset that's, kicking out, $500,000 a year in royalty income, well, you're going to pay much more than that to get that asset, right? And you're competing with everybody else trying to buy it as well. Um, but that's one of the things too that Prosper helps with is we can help those that are looking to acquire or divest. We can help be uh, someone that is tapped into those brokers, tapped into uh, assets that are out there for sale, and we can be looking for those deals for anybody who's interested in acquiring. But
So it's
yeah,
not a world for the novice.
exactly, exactly. There's no, you know, you go onto the internet and say I want to buy minerals, right? And maybe you find your way to a broker site or an auction site and you see a deal. Well, now you got to get in the data room, and now there's a data room that's showing the leases, the title, the production history, the decline curves, all of that. And so you got to just be able to decipher that information and understand, like, well, what's the cash flow? What are the assumptions behind this data? And what am I willing to spend? So definitely not for the novice. You've got to know, you know, the landman piece, the title piece to understand what is it they actually own. But then you've also got to be able to understand the engineering side to go, what is this type curve? What is this production model? What is my cash flow stream? What are the assumptions that were used to create this, cash flow model, right? Are we, what are we at right now? Are we at $65 a barrel of oil? Are we at 55? Where, you've got to play all of these assumptions into it to make a decision as far as, is this a good property? Or am I going to overpay, underpay? The complexity behind it, all of those things. So it's definitely not for the novice.
It's not for the faint of heart.
No, it's not for the faint of heart. One thing I will say about Landman that I, I mean, I've been on some operations that are pretty intense, and I love the phrase that is used in that show of, and I'm gonna not quote it perfectly, but it was, we live in a world of crisis to crisis with moments of abundance or success. And I think it's John Hamm talking to Billy Bob Thornton.
Yeah.
And there's some truth to that because the it's not, I mean, drilling these wells and fracking these wells, I mean, it's dangerous work. You're dealing with a lot of heavy pipe, a lot of pressure. You're doing some really dangerous stuff in order to get this oil and gas out of the ground, right? And when things go wrong, they can go wrong really bad in a bad way. And so there's a lot of focus on safety in the industry to protect the people that are doing that work. But there's things that happen that's outside, control, whether it's human error or mechanical failure, a bad piece of pipe. There's things that can happen out there. And, a lot of people's, lives are, come into play. And then, a lot of money comes into play too, right? When you're looking at, okay, how much, is this going to cost us because of this issue? So I will say Landman does a good job of at least explaining the intensity of the operations out
Yeah.
there
It's
and
chaos.
things that can happen, right? Maybe not so much the cartel piece, but things that can happen when you're dealing with work, this type of work, right? It's very intense and you you've got to understand a lot of the math behind it to make sure you're keeping everybody protected and you can drill a good well. So
So in the show, Billy
mm,
Bob Thornton's son, I forget what his name is.
it's
He
Corey, right?
Corey,
Corey.
yeah,
Yeah,
Corey. Um, he is presented to us as sort of this genius at being able to figure out where the wells should be. And
right.
is that another fantasy of or are they people who really do have that kind of skill at being able to?
It's when I look at Billy Bob Thornton's reaction to it, that is how I read it. Is you know there's luck behind a lot of that, and he's going, wow, how the hell did you pull this off? And you drill 6 wells, and they all hit. I always understood the rule. At least when you're doing exploratory type drilling, right? Um, one well pays for the other nine. You drill 10 of them, one of them may hit, right? Um, so in order to go out there into a field that it sounds, a shallow field and he drills a little bit deeper, and hits on 6 wells or however many it was, that would be a rarity, in my opinion, for that to happen. But I'm not saying it can't happen, but,
It's great.
you know,
It's great storytelling. Is what it
oh,
is.
it's great. Oh,
Yeah,
it's great. So,
yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
Well, I find it interesting, and I find that that whole world is interesting. And having lived in Wyoming, you don't have the oil and gas kind of uh, thing there like you do in Texas, but they do
Right.
have they have minerals. They have the trana and all of that
Yep.
stuff, which is significant. It's a huge industry there. They got coal
Right.
there. I mean, and what this what this communicates to me is that there are a lot of people who do really hard, dangerous work in order for us to be able to sit in our homes and have um, a nice, comfortable life, whether it's air
Absolutely.
conditioning or heat, and be able to get in our car and drive to the market or drive to the beach. And these people are doing really dangerous work. I had
Oh
on one
yeah.
of my I make all these trips, as you know, and I was staying in I had this archaeologist. I had met with him over in Utah, and I was driving home, driving back east, and I stopped in I think Green River, Wyoming, or Rock Springs, either Green River or Rock Springs, and the hotel said, "Well, we provide dinner for our guests." And I says, "Why?" He says, "Because all the restaurants in town are bars." He says, they're all there for the miners, and so it's
Yeah.
not really a place for our guests to go. So we'll provide you dinner. So I'm coming down the elevator, and this guy gets on the elevator, and I start talking to him. I said, "Well, hey, you want to eat together?" He said, "Sure, we want to eat together." So he's about my age, and we start talking, and it turns out that he's a little bit younger. He's probably 20 years younger. But he says that he had started his career as going into the mines as a teenager, and he said
Mhm.
he hated it. He hated going in the mines. He got claustrophobia. And he said, and he did it for about 8 years. And then he moved out of the mines and went to work for the companies that made the equipment, the heavy equipment that goes into the mines. And now he's a
Yeah.
troubleshooter for that company, and he travels all over the world solving equipment problems at mines all over the world. And so we're having
Hmm.
a conversation about it, and it's kind of interesting. And then this other guy comes and sits next to us, and he's older than me. I mean, and and we ask him, so, well, were you a miner too? And he says, "Oh yeah,"
Right.
and he had spent 40 years in the mines.
Wow.
And yeah,
Wow.
wow. And I'm thinking, how did you do that? And he just said, you just get used to it. He just really
Yeah.
deflected all that wildness away from us. But that's what has meaning. One of the things that has meaning to me is that a lot of these people are working very hard so that we can be very comfortable, and
Oh
we
yeah.
and we should be very appreciative of that.
Mhm.
And I hope they are.
Absolutely.
I hope they're paid well. They should be paid well
They
because
should be. They should be. Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it's dangerous. It's dangerous work. But so I look at all of that, and I look at the geology of the West, and it's to me, it's the most fascinating thing. And I wish I'd learned more from my geology class in college. I took a geology class because I would have a real understanding of what's going on, and appreciate more what you're doing. Um,
Yeah. No. I'll say those that work those jobs, yeah, they deserve to get paid very good money, and it's so hard, those jobs. I mean, so for me, um, my after my first year of college, so I went to college at the University of Oklahoma, and I was after my freshman year, I wasn't going to get an internship anywhere at an oil company. I applied, but I didn't. I had generic freshman courses under my belt, so I actually went out and worked on a roustabout crew in the oil fields that first summer in southeastern Oklahoma, and that was the hardest work I've ever done. I mean, it was 12, 14-hour days with a pipe wrench, just running around in the heat, putting together oil field equipment, right? And you know, I would work all day. I would come home, I would eat dinner, go to bed, get up and do it again the next day. And it was all summer, right? And I just did it for, 3 months during a summer. But the folks out there doing it as their job, I mean, it's so, and it made me appreciate working in an office and, being able to like live the lives we have in a home because you can, go out there and drill and produce that oil. But, if the people that are doing it aren't out there doing it, we don't have it. And so I think of what you said there with this gentleman who worked in the mines and then started working on the equipment. The fact that he spent time in the mines probably made him better at looking for troubleshooting with the equipment
Yeah.
because he knows what it's being used for. He's probably put his hands on it down there. He's seen issues with, how the equipment can fail or different nuances when it's down in there in the mine. What's the environment like down there, right? So I guarantee you, taking that experience up to the level where he's now working on the equipment, he's probably doing a fantastic job because he knows that what it feels like to put your hands on that equipment in the mines. And so I think those that do work those really hard jobs, if they're ever able to move their careers into a place where they're managing or dealing with different things, that experience you can't top it. And so
You're not going
those,
to
those
learn it in
done
a
the
college
hard
class.
work. So
You're
yeah,
not going
you
to learn.
can't learn that kind of stuff. So I mean, I learned so much from just working with the pumpers and the foremen and the crews early in my career, of all of these things with the oil and gas industry. I mean, I never would have learned it in an office or in a classroom. Um, so to anybody who's early in their career or is in working in those dangerous jobs, I mean, you're learning things that most people will never experience in their lives. So uh,
Do you,
it's fun.
what's your level of optimism about the future of this industry?
Oh, total optimism. I don't see oil and gas going anywhere in our lifetime or future lifetimes. It kind of reverts back to the need for it, right? We're always going to have a need for it, and the oil companies, the minds that are working for these companies to figure out the technology to make these things happen. Um, it's incredible. Um, there's definitely plenty of push for green energy, which is great. Um, but I think a lot of people have probably figured out that while green energy is great and there's a need for it, right? And there's a need to grow it. Um, I don't see green's ever gonna replace oil and gas anytime soon. Um, so no, I have a ton of optimism for this industry.
Well, that's good.
It, it's not going away, um, and it's exciting to see what's going to happen next. Um, it's a roller coaster ride. There's no industry like it. I mean, we have ups, downs, up, downs. It just seems like there's always something different that could be driving us. Whether it's I just prices. What's driving shareholder value for these operators? What technology is changing? What geologic discoveries happen? It keeps you on your toes, which I love because every day it's something different.
That's
So
great.
it's pretty cool.
Um,
I have to be a part of the oil and gas industry for sure.
well, we'll put into the show notes just how people can connect with you if they want to connect with you and see if
I
they
love.
can find a way into this world, I think that would be outstanding because I appreciate how you have worked with my family, and
Mhm.
and I think we're very knowledgeable now because
Mhm.
it used to be, but you're you're providing great information for us that is really helpful and gives us context for understanding what is happening.
Yeah, right. That's all like, it's your asset. It's, people who own it, they should know what they own, right? Just like you own your house. I feel like you know your house. You know the crooks and nannies and you know
Yes, that
where your property is and where your trees are and what you're doing here. You know all of that about your asset. And minerals are no different. I think everybody who owns them should know what they own, where they own them, how much, and what's happening around them. So
I agree with you.
the more we can help our clients or anybody understand it a little bit better, that's what we love to do. So
Well, I know we could keep talking, and it's such a fascinating thing. And the popular culture of all of this is also what is fascinating. It's not, and it's just not landman, and it's the popular culture is not just about oil and gas. The popular culture is about Texas and
yeah,
Oklahoma, and
yeah,
it's and to a certain extent, probably New Mexico to a certain extent. But
good.
that area of the world, I lived in Oklahoma for a while, and
Mhm.
it's a different world, and it's a hard place to live,
Right.
weather-wise, and yet there's good things about it as well. And so I find it interesting. I think about these oil movies, the Daniel Day-Lewis's and Giant and Landman TV series and others that have.
Hang on, keep talking. There it is.
There you go.
So my
Your
light
life.
went off.
And I'm also thinking about the West Texas films like that Cormac McCarthy does, and it's a different world than over here in the East and in the South, and so I find it fascinating, and I think you're fortunate to be there and to do the work that you do, and I appreciate the service you provide.
It's you're right. It's a hard place to live in some areas, but there's a lot of pride out there too. I think those that live out there, that we work in the industry, we have a lot of pride in the the oil and gas, the energy industry. It's a lifeblood out there to a lot of the economies, and that I think there's a lot of pride. I think everybody's real proud of what's happening out there and the fact that these economies can grow and thrive when there's oil and gas to develop. So I think you nailed it. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for being on the podcast, and it's been
Thanks
great.
for having me.
And
Yeah,
I'll see you fairly soon, in a few days, and
that's right.
appreciate your service to us. And I hope folks that you will step back and take a kind of another look at what the world of energy is. It's and kind of lay aside the politics of it because it's a lightning rod for politics, but actually look at it for what it truly provides to us as a society, and have an appreciation for the people who bring it to us. The hardships that they go through to do the jobs that they have. And so, I think that's it's worth remembering when the next time you pull up to your gas station and you're pumping gas, and there's a lot of what oil, sweat, and tears that have gone into that, and so that's the way it is. So thank you all for watching the Eddie Network podcast, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.